Your Honor. We call Carol Bellin.
Do you solemnly swear the testimony you'll make will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Please have a seat.
Yes.
Stellan, what is your position with Good School Missoula?
Adverse witness?
Yes, Your Honor. Can I treat it as adverse?
I'm a member.
Did you ever hold any other positions with Good School?
No,
Were you ever treasurer?
no,
Any officer?
no,
Director?
no.
Okay. As a member of Good School Missoula, were you aware of the activities of Good School Missoula prior to initiating this lawsuit?
No,
Did you attend any board meetings?
no,
Okay. Did you approve of the litigation by Good Schools Missoula?
On May 31st, I decided to join Good Schools Missoula and speak from my unique experience in support of their efforts.
And when you say your unique experience, what do you mean by that?
Well, there's several. Number one, I served for 3 years as a trustee for Missoula County Public Schools and participated in school board meetings, committee meetings that dealt with this issue. I had concerns about the process that was being used. I had many concerns about our school district's current needs for that, not current, at that date, we already had needs for the facility that was being sold, not whether or not we needed the facility in the future, we had needs. I had those concerns. I also am a parent of a student that's in the Roosevelt School, would be in the Roosevelt School District if the school were open.
Okay. And it's fair to say that you believe that the foundation purchased it for a value that was less than its fair market value, the Roosevelt School property?
Absolutely.
And prior to filing the litigation, were you aware that the foundation paid $1.5 million for the Roosevelt School property?
Prior to the,
Litigation being filed.
I would imagine the dates would work out that way, yes. And I know that that's what they paid.
And you were aware that Tom Stevens had appraised the fair market value of the property at $1.45 million?
I am aware of that.
And you were aware of that before this litigation was filed?
Yes.
And you don't dispute today that $1.5 million is greater than $1.45 million?
I do not dispute that.
And have you seen any other written appraisal appraising the fair market value of the Roosevelt School property at greater than $1.45 million?
If I were not low income and could afford to hire an appraiser, I would have done that, but there was no other appraisal ever completed.
You briefly just summarized your concerns with the sale of the Roosevelt School property. One was that it was sold for less than fair market value. The other was you were concerned as a parent of a child in that district.
I was very concerned as a parent of the child in the district. I was concerned because of the pressures and rushed process that I was put under as a trustee during those months. I was concerned because we had pressing needs in our school district for facilities and that there was no adequate facility plan in place to address them. I was concerned that as taxpayers, we were ending up spending more money to make additions onto other schools that were invalidating any claimed savings. I had many concerns over the process.
Okay, so to categorize that, you've got the process, you felt it was too rushed?
Yes, absolutely. There was no benefit to, I couldn't understand why it was so rushed because when you look at some of the dates of some of the actions that they were forcing upon us, they would have no positive impact on our budget. There was no benefit to the school district for making those rushed decisions at the timing that they did. For example, the lease extension, and I voiced those concerns in the meeting. Why are we rushing to extend this lease? It will have no positive impact on our budget this year. We could benefit from the lease money. It will absolutely reduce the value of the school if we extend this lease. So there is no financial benefit to doing this. And why are we being rushed?
Okay, so you felt the process was rushed.
Absolutely, yes.
Now you just also raised this issue about the lease. You're concerned about the lease?
Well, absolutely. I also knew as a trustee that I trusted some of the administrators very well that worked there. I think it was Mr. Johnson had provided information that market value square footage lease was between $8 and $12, or $8 and $10, or $8 and $12 per square foot, and we were currently leasing that school at approximately $1.50 to $1.67 per square foot. And that was of great concern to me in my role of fiduciary duty as a trustee.
Okay, so it's fair to say you disagree with the public school board's decision to renew the lease?
I did not understand why we were rushed to do that, and I voted against the extension of the lease for that reason.
Okay. And you also just raised an issue with your child that lived in the area. What was your concern there?
Well, I would have loved for my child to have been able to walk to his school. Roosevelt School is less than a half a mile from my home. As it was at that time when he was in elementary school, with the closure first of Willard School and then the closure of Roosevelt School, he would have had to have walked across Stevens Avenue, Brooks Street, and Higgins Avenue to get safely to his school. So that prohibited me from allowing him to walk to school as an elementary school child.
Okay, so you had concerns about convenience of your child getting to school and the safety of your child.
Yes.
And then you also mentioned that you believe that it wasn't a financially beneficial decision because that school was needed for the public school system today.
It was. We were at that time trying to find a location for a centralized preschool facility. We had have an alternative high school that was in sub-conditions in a very old school without a gymnasium or a library or a science lab, and the Roosevelt School had a very high-tech science lab that was installed in it. It had a library, it had a gymnasium, and it was the perfect size for the alternative school. We had debated for years the need for our school system to consolidate its sprawling administration buildings to reduce costs. That would have been a perfectly logical option for the Roosevelt School, would be to consolidate administrative offices. Those are just some of the immediate needs that we could have used. Also, the Adult Education Learning Center was moved to close another closed elementary school, and the facilities at Roosevelt would be much more centralized for the adult education system. So there were numerous reasons, and I repeatedly, as a trustee, called for more adequate facility planning before we dispose of such a valuable asset that the public, cherishes its schools. We invest a lot of our money in building the schools, and it deserves a decent facility plan before you dispose of those properties, especially a school with a nice library, gymnasium, and science lab.
So it's important to you to have a school located in that neighborhood.
Yes, it's a central, whole city block is a very valuable piece of property.
And as a school board member for the public schools, that was important to you.
It was important to me, yes.
And you voiced those concerns at the school board
I
meeting.
did, yes.
And you actually voted against the sale of the Roseville School property.
I did not feel we were undergoing a proper process for the sale of the school.
Right, so you voted against it.
I did,
But it's fair to say that the school board overrode your vote and voted to sell.
that's right.
And then, of course, the final issue you had was with the fair market value that was received for.
Yes, I had several concerns about that. You know, of course, as a trustee, you can undergo some real pressure. And one instance in particular stands out in my mind when a parent called me at home and told me very emphatically that I must vote to sell Roosevelt School because it was a toxic school and it could not, if we didn't sell it, it would be a liability to the district. And I asked about why, and this parent told me they had just had dinner with Mr. Haggerty, and that made me feel very uncomfortable about the pressure that was being put on me, and I took her concerns to heart, and I contacted the school district director of operations and maintenance, and I contacted a trusted building environmental engineer that I knew, and I asked for an individual tour of the school to see if those concerns were valid enough to move my vote. And during that tour, I did ask about the value of the school building from the director of operations at that time, and I was told at least $3 million, and I trusted that administrator's opinion very much. I also knew that the Roosevelt School was built in 1955 for
Excuse me,
400.
Charlie, hang on for a minute. Your Honor, I'm going to object as we're into multiple layers of hearsay here with conversations between individuals who are not being called to testify here today on behalf of the schools in Missoula or the district.
I don't think the answer she's giving is for the truth of what was said, but for the reasons that she had for what she did.
Okay.
Am I correct? That's what she's,
Is that how
that's
you
what
think?
she's
Yeah, that's
saying.
fine.
Okay, as long as that's what they're being offered.
So just to finish, I know, because I care about the school in my neighborhood, that it was built for a value of $440,000 in 1955, and it's had significant improvements with science labs and cabling and modernization. And so a $600,000 value for the building itself seemed unbelievably low to me, that it could not have increased in value from 1955 to 2005. And also the lifespan of the school, I was told, was in good condition and would certainly serve this district for at least another 50 years.
All right, so you believe that it was sold for below fair market value?
I do.
Yes. And that was based on your own opinion and these conversations you had with some other people?
With district, officials, yes.
But you have never consulted with a certified appraiser about the value of the property?
I could not afford to. I would have loved to have been able to commission my own appraisal of that just to have a second opinion. But I know those appraisals are very expensive, and so no, I don't. There was no way to get another appraisal because they're so expensive.
So your answer is no, you did not converse with any certified appraiser about the value of the Roseville property?
No.
And you didn't see any other written appraisal other than Mr. Stevens?
There has never been another appraisal to my knowledge. I do know that Mr. Ford presented information about the school, about the fair market value, and I do know that was right about the time that I came onto the board, I think, and I do know that he stated that extending the lease would reduce the fair market value of the school if it were going to be sold.
Who would Mr. Ford be?
Mr. Ford was some kind of real estate person. Again, it was, I think, during my first month as a school board trustee.
And again, now went to this issue of the lease and concerns with the lease.
Yes.
So with respect to your concern about the price, you're basing that solely on your personal opinion, not on any professional appraisal you've ever seen.
There's been no other professional appraisal. This was done by the best conversations that I could glean, and then I had to make a judgment as my role as trustee in terms of trying to protect the best interests of the school district.
And you use that information to form your decision to vote against the sale of Roosevelt School. So it's fair to say that really your biggest concern was with the decision of the school board to sell the Roosevelt property.
I don't know if I would give that any higher weight than the process that was used, the pressures, the inadequate information that was provided, to be given verbal reports by an appraiser and then have to vote like within 24 or 48 hours without having access to the written full appraisal. Those were pressures that a trustee should not have to. And this was in the day when most of the, virtually all of those meetings were held behind closed doors of the administrators. This is prior to more open meetings that have
Okay.
come in recent years.
So it's fair to say your issues are the process by which it was sold and then the actual decision that it was sold. Nothing further, no.
Mrs. Bellin, when were you elected as a trustee of the district?
Excuse me?
When were you elected?
May 2003.
And were you present when Dan Funch was testifying here today?
Yes.
Okay. Did you hear Mr. Funch identify you as an individual who provided information regarding the appraisal prior to the filing of the lawsuit?
I heard him say that he thought that I had reviewed the appraisal.
And did you provide information based on your review of the appraisal in order to have this lawsuit filed?
No.
Okay. Are you aware of who did provide that information?
No.
Okay. Did you have any contact with Good Schools Missoula as an entity or Mr. Andes prior to your leaving the board?
No.
And you said you joined on May 31st, is that correct?
Yes.
After the lawsuit was filed. Is that correct?
I'm not so familiar with the date the lawsuit was filed, but I do know that I joined on the day that they held a press conference, May 31st.
Okay. And you were chosen to be the spokesperson, is that correct?
I was one of many citizens that spoke that day.
Okay. Have you reviewed or were you aware of the fact that the lawsuit was originally filed on April 11th when you were still a board member?
Only after reviewing things through this litigation was I aware of that date.
You were provided notice as a trustee that the district was being sued?
I may, let's see. Well, I guess I was then, as a trustee, told that there was a lawsuit.
And you were told it's a substantive lawsuit, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Mrs. Bellin, you talked about your concerns about the Roosevelt building in general, specifically to do with the use of the facility, is that correct?
Yes.
Those have to do with the closure of the facility back in 1999, is that correct?
No, they had to do with the lack of facility planning that was critical to me making a decision as to whether it would be a responsible decision to dispose of this property at this time.
Okay, and were you aware of a 1999 lawsuit challenging the closure and lease of Roosevelt?
I was not at that time, no. I moved to Missoula in 2000.
Okay. Prior to becoming a member of Good Schools Missoula, were you aware of the fact that there was a lawsuit filed in 1999 challenging the sale and closure, the sale and lease?
No, I think the only thing I saw was I saw some pamphlets when we came here that dealt with the closure, community outcry about that, but I was not familiar with any litigation about this.
Okay. Have you subsequently become aware of the 1999 lawsuit?
I really don't know enough about the lawsuit. I mean, I've heard reference to it, but I don't know when it occurred or who brought it or what the substance of that lawsuit was.
Okay. So prior to joining Good Schools Missoula, had you yourself done a factual, I guess, analysis of the concerns and the complaint and determine if it was appropriate to join that group?
I joined the group primarily on the basis that I felt really badly about the process that was used in the sale, and I knew that that was the topic, and that was the concern of Good Schools Missoula. And I felt that my unique position contributed something to that, both as a parent of a child that would have gone to Roosevelt and as a trustee that had been part of the process.
Okay, and your dissatisfaction with that process was based on the fact that you don't believe enough time was granted to trustees to make this decision, is that correct?
It didn't feel right to me that we were rushed so much. I could not understand what was behind being pushed on the time frame that we were to dispose of the school.
Okay, so this was your personal feeling?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall the district advertising its solicitation for bids?
I do know that the school district placed advertisements, and I did speak as a trustee, strongly encouraging the school district to issue a formal request for proposals, because I was aware that there were nonprofit organizations in the area that require a formal request for proposal in order for them to dedicate the staff resources to preparing such a complex proposal to buy a building.
Carol, is the Missoula County Public Schools required by law to initiate the request for proposal process to sell this building?
Obviously, they weren't required by law to do it, but I have never understood why I...
Objection calls for legal conclusion, Your Honor.
She's testifying her role as a trustee and what her understanding was at the time.
Oh, her understanding
Well,
is
wait,
something different.
Are we talking about understanding, or are you asking her for what is the law?
I'm asking her for what was her understanding at this point.
Objection withdrawn.
Well, my understanding is that it must have been legal because we had the other person who voted against the sale of Roosevelt was an attorney, and I expected that, I trusted his insight as an attorney that there were some things amiss, and I think he would have spoken up as a trustee and as an attorney if it were required. Nonetheless, I did speak that I thought it was important to have an RFP. I don't understand why we put out RFPs for such insignificant items every day, and yet a major asset like a school was not given the process of an RFP.
Your Honor, may I approach? Carol, I'm going to ask you to, if you can, identify that document for me.
This is the display advertisement that was placed in the Missoula newspaper.
And what date was that published on?
December 12th. That was a difficult time for anyone right at the holidays to provide a complex response to such a large real estate purchase.
A difficult time for anyone or a difficult time for you?
I think it's a difficult time for anyone. December 12th was the advertisement, and I know the deadline was January 31st.
So there were 6 weeks in order to get a proposal submitted to the district?
6 weeks over the holiday season, yes. That's not very much time for, I think, there are many public adaptabilities of a school building, and those often require federal support, state support, and those are not things that can be easily accomplished in 6 weeks' time over the holidays.
I'm sorry, has this been marked or admitted?
I'm asking that it be submitted at this point.
Any objection?
No objection. I'm wondering what the exhibit number is. Is it 58?
Or 58.
58.
Submitted.
May I approach again, Your Honor?
No, she's saying
Carol, I'll ask you to review that document if you would, please, and tell me if you can identify it.
It says public notice. It doesn't look like a display ad, so I'm not sure where this was advertised, but it says at the top, run every 2
And the
weeks.
question was, do you know what it is?
I don't, well, it's a public notice.
It says public notice, but like this one is what's called out of the newspaper.
This was a display ad, and I don't know exactly where this public notice was.
She doesn't know.
Okay. If you're not familiar with that, I'll withdraw that and introduce it for a different witness. Carol, was it the practice of the district, based on your knowledge as a trustee, to run ads in the Missoulian and to give public notice when it intended to take action?
Could you repeat that, please?
Okay. Looking at Exhibit 58, for example, was it the district's practice to use the Missoulian to advertise its practices or when it was going to take action or when it was required to give notice?
For local matters, it is the practice to place public notice in the Missoulian. However, for a public asset like a school that could be adapted to many other public uses, and this was something I do know I commented on, advertising simply locally seems inadequate.
That's your opinion, is that
Yes,
correct?
I did think that was inadequate advertising.
What's the rule?
Regarding, the law doesn't require publication in a newspaper, but publication is seen as presumptive right of notice. Public school is required to post in its general accepted
What's the
practices.
statute?
Statute 2-3-103. But I'm gonna have to, I'll check that at lunch to be darn sure.
103?
I believe so, but I'll check it at lunch to be sure.
Okay. You mean administrative regs?
No. But the board does have policies, Your Honor, that I will enter that explain how it
Can you
works.
introduce those?
I will.
How about now?
I wasn't planning on doing it through this witness to be, Your Honor, I can have them after lunch for sure. I can get it in through different witnesses. Carol, your concerns so far are based on your opinion of how things should have gone, is that correct?
Yes?
Okay, that's all I have.
No question.
Thank
I
you.
just got one follow-up question. Just to make the record clear, as a trustee, you were aware that in fact a public notice of the sale growth of school property had been made?
I was aware of a display advertisement.
Okay. You just don't know if it was put in paper?
I know that it was displayed, a public notice to my knowledge is something you place in the public notice columns of the classifieds. And there may be other legal requirements for public notice that I'm not aware of, but I do know that the school district placed display ads in the Missoulian.
Okay. That was my question. So you did know that they were published in the Missoula?
They were in the Missoulian, yes.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Go ahead, next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Call Judy Smith.
Sit right up here, raise your right hand and be sworn.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you make will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please have a seat right here.
Ms. Smith, what is your position with Good Schools Missoula?
I'm a member.
Okay. And when did you become a member of Good Schools Missoula?
I was one of the folks that helped found Good Schools Missoula, so it's kind of hard to answer it. As it happened, I was there.
Okay. Is it fair to say then you were pretty aware of the activities of Good School Missoula before this litigation was filed?
Yes,
And did you approve of Good School Missoula filing this litigation?
yes.
And it's true, though, that prior to filing this lawsuit, you hadn't had a chance to see any written appraisal of the fair market value.
Well, actually, when the appraisal came out that Mr. Stevens did, and this is where these dates are challenging, I tried to review them last night. Anyway, I think his appraisal was before we actually started Good Schools Missoula. And I did read his appraisal.
Okay, you did read it before this lawsuit was filed.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Okay. So you were aware that he had placed an opinion of a fair market value of $1.45 million on the Roosevelt School property.
Right.
It's fair to say, though, that you had concerns about the price that the Roselle School property was sold for.
That's true. I didn't think that that appraisal was perhaps what it was, the fair market value that it said was the fair market value.
Do you think that the property is worth more?
Yes.
Okay. And did you have the chance to review any other formal written appraisal of the property?
No, I didn't.
Did you speak to any certified appraisers regarding the value of the property?
Actually, I did. But it wasn't someone that was in a local community member. It was someone that I knew from a past experience and laid out sort of the information for him, and he suggested to me that he'd be glad to talk to our attorney about it.
Okay. And who was that individual?
William Gordon
And where did Mr. Gordon reside?
in Austin, Texas.
And do you know if he's licensed as an appraiser in the state of
Yes, he is.
Montana?
He does public, in the state of Montana, sorry. I don't know that.
Okay. But he's licensed in some other states?
Yes, in Texas.
Is it fair to say, though, in addition to your belief that the property was sold for less than fair market value, you also had other concerns about the selling property?
Mhm.
And what were those?
Well, I certainly had concern about the impact on the neighborhood, but that's already been somewhat covered, but that it was going from a local school to actually becoming a private school where folks would be bused or driven or whatever into it. I was concerned that our neighborhood would lose a resource that we had used effectively. I was concerned about the process that was used in the actual proposal gathering. So there were a number of concerns, and actually I was concerned about the role of your institution in this particular situation. I know that other folks maybe haven't mentioned that as clearly, but for my experience and others, we were aware that you've been interested in that school for a long time. You meaning the
I was
institution.
going to say, just to be clear, I don't own any institutions.
Yeah, right. The people you represent have been interested in that school for a long time, and so the neighborhood was aware of that and was trying to monitor what the meaning of that was, and felt that there was a pressure from that institution to move things along inappropriately and to meet deadlines that had been given by that institution.
Okay, so when you say that institution, are you talking about the Missoula Catholic Schools, or are you talking about the Loyola Sacred Heart High School Foundation?
I understand that's an important distinction to you, but to us it wasn't an important distinction, so I would not be able to say.
Okay. But as you sit here today, you don't dispute the fact that those are two separate entities.
Objection asked and answered.
Overruled, you can answer.
I'm aware that they have a relationship with each other, but the exact nature of it I don't know.
Okay. And you said that you had concerns about the institution.
Let me interrupt you. You said you were aware that there were people interested in that school. That's Loyola was interested in it, right? Right? Missoula already owned it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
And so I'm not understanding her next answers were that the two of you are the same.
Well, maybe I misspoke or you misheard, but I asked is Missoula Catholic Schools and Loyola Sacred Heart High School Foundation separate entities?
She's lumped them all together.
She's lumping them together.
Okay.
And then I asked if she disputed today, sitting here, having heard testimony and other, that did she dispute that they are in fact separate entities? And then she said she doesn't know.
No, I said they have a relationship, but I don't know what it
Okay.
is.
You don't know what it is. Okay. So you don't know whether they are separate entities or not.
Nope.
Have you done any research to determine whether they're separate entities?
Actually, I've read the things that have been filed by my attorney that has addressed some of that, but that's separate from that.
And obviously you didn't learn anything from that.
From reading his briefs, I hope so.
Well, okay, then based on what you learned, did you learn whether they are separate entities or not separate entities?
I would assume they're probably separate entities in the sense of some sort of corporate structure, but whether they are separate entities in any kind of influence or how decisions get made, I don't know.
Okay. So you also talked about, you were concerned about the process by which the school was sold.
Right,
Okay. You mentioned you thought it was sold for less than fair market value.
right.
You were concerned about the institution that was there wanting to purchase the building? Okay. Was there anything specific about the institution that you didn't like?
Well, no, not, aside from being a private school, getting a public asset at below market value, no.
Okay. And you believe they were getting it below market value because you believe it's worth more than they paid for it?
Yes, and I really respect my own opinion because I've talked to a number of people who also thought that there might be some higher value available. And I was the one at one of the board members to say what kind of appraisal was it going to be? Was it going to be a market appraisal or a multi-use appraisal? Because that was something that I was aware of, that there could be multi-use in that area of town that could be used like for residents, and that would probably make the value higher.
But you've seen no other formal written appraisal higher than 1.45 million?
No, I haven't seen a formal written appraisal.
You haven't spoke to anybody that's certified as an appraiser and licensed in the state of Montana to give commercial appraisals?
No. But I
And
also
you,
don't.
and I forgot to ask you yourself, aren't licensed or certified as an appraiser?
No, I am not. But I also don't believe that appraisals necessarily give the best, highest market value. So I think your question line there assumes something that I don't assume.
Okay. What do you believe gives the fair market value?
Putting it on the market and having as many possible proposals generated, which didn't happen in this situation.
You're aware that more than one proposal was made for this bill?
Yes, and I'm aware of people who would have liked to have done a proposal and weren't able to because of the timeline and the lack of an RFP.
So it's fair to say, again, you're concerned with the time and the process.
Yeah, I'm concerned that what happened really gave advantage to a particular situation.
And any issues with the lease?
Well, the lease was for too little money, and that was certainly verified by some of the things that some of the school administration personnel themselves discovered, that there should have been a different rate per square foot. And so we were surprised when we saw the low rate.
And you're aware that the lease was between the public schools and the Missoula Catholic schools?
I'll believe you.
Okay, so you never determined whether they're, strike that. Do you know who the lease was for the public school, who it was made with?
I am assuming it was with the Missoula Catholic Schools and the School District 1.
Okay.
But I didn't look at it to determine that, no.
And are you aware of any lease between the public schools and the Loyola Sacred Heart High School Foundation?
I guess I'm not, if it's the other one is with the Loyola.
And it's true that prior to this lawsuit being filed, you didn't do anything to determine whether there was a lease with Loyola Sacred Heart High School Foundation.
My assumption is there's a relationship between those two entities. And so, no, I did not go beyond that.
And that's an assumption you made based on your own personal feelings, or have you seen some written documents that tell you that?
I went to a couple of websites and tried to determine if there was any interlocking decision-making, et cetera, like that. And so that's mostly my own investigative work.
Okay, and based on that investigation, were you able to determine whether there was any interlocking decision-making?
Actually, I would hesitate to say right now, because I don't know that I could say the name of someone that was on both boards or something like that.
So as you sit here today, you can't tell us of any interlocking decision-making between Missoula Catholic Schools and the Loyola Sacred Heart High School Foundation?
They're both Catholic.
Well, they got that going for them. Although that's not true, Mr. Sturgis is Protestant.
And I think that's, I think that's what her conclusion is based on, am I right?
Well, I think so too, Your Honor. I was just trying to establish whether she believed or had any information regarding a legal relationship between Missoula Catholic
Well,
Schools.
I don't think she knows that, but legal doesn't always mean that it doesn't, the absence of legal doesn't always mean that it doesn't exist. And I think that's her point, is that these were two Catholic groups interested in education. Is that a conclusion that you agree with? And you think that what, they talk to each other, or they
Yes,
read the same stuff, or what?
they have common interest.
And you're thinking that those common interests transfer from one to the other, or?
All right, so just to summarize, you had concerns with the process by which the public school board chose to sell the Roosevelt School property.
I did.
Okay. You had problems with the lease that the public school board entered into.
I do.
You had issues with the lack of a facility planning,
Right?
and you had issues with giving up an asset to the public school. And then you also had issues with the price that was received.
Yes, and I should add one more, which is I came to all the meetings where the various three proposals were discussed, and it was pretty clear to me that there was a higher offer for the school, and I never understood why that was not entertained
And what higher offer was that?
for Mr. Carice.
Okay, and what offer did he make?
Well, basically he offered that the lease had so devalued the property for the immediate that he would be willing to sort of hold his interest, which he called an option, by putting down $20,000, and then he would pay market value at the end of the time when the lease was run, or anything else that the school board would get as an offer. So he would meet any offer once the lease was gone.
Okay. Was there anything in Mr., and how do you pronounce his name? Because I know I'm
Curtis.
Curtis?
Course.
Course? This we can all agree. Mr. Course. Was there anything in Mr. Course' offer that required him to purchase the building after the lease had terminated?
I maybe don't understand your question.
Well, my understanding is he offered to pay $20,000 to buy an option to purchase the property after the lease terminated, correct? Okay. Do you know if there was anything in his offer that required him, after the lease terminated, to actually pay money and buy the building?
Oh, I see what you're saying. In the sense that he was making a good faith offer and putting money down, that's probably what he would say.
But he wasn't bound. If he didn't have the money in 5 years, he didn't have to go through the sale, did he?
I didn't see the actual document, but that could have been something that perhaps was part of the conversation. I was also under the understanding that he asked for more time to be able to actually verify and get his offer in better shape, and wasn't given that.
Okay. So again, that's a problem with the process.
It's not, who is he? Is he a real estate developer or?
No, he is a person who went to Roosevelt School, whose family still lives in the neighborhood area over there, who, when he heard that this was happening, wanted to make an offer on the school to actually do a science and mathematics type institute for students.
Okay.
He's in the different documents there.
I think I just asked, again, that was an issue with the process. He didn't have enough time to get his offer in order.
Right, and that, I guess the other more fundamental thing is that there wasn't a thing of like, okay, here's an option that might give us more money, so let's be sure we actually take a good look at this one. It was sort of like, get that one out of the way and move with the one that we want.
Okay. And that's your opinion. You don't have any other reason to believe that?
Well, it's the opinion of a fair number of people, but yes.
Okay. And again, prior to filing this litigation, did you do any investigation to determine if Mr. Coors' offer required him to go through and pay money to purchase the building after the end of the lease?
The research I did was that he was not able to do some of the things that he wanted and offered to do. I don't know if that was specifically it.
Okay. But as you sit here today, you can't tell us in his written offer whether he agreed that after 5 years he'd be bound and have to purchase the property.
No, I can't.
It's fair to say you didn't do that investigation, did you?
Objection asked and answered.
Sustained.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Ms. Smith, you testified that you helped found Good Schools Missoula, is that correct? Okay. So you had reviewed the appraisal report prior to the filing of the lawsuit. Had you contacted Mr. Gordon in Austin, Texas prior to filing the lawsuit?
Yeah, I tried to think about that last night. The timeline is of interest. No, I think I probably contacted him a couple months after.
Okay. So at the time of the filing of the lawsuit, you had no opinion besides your own that there was anything wrong with the appraisal report or that it wasn't a fair market value?
Well, actually, I had other people's opinions besides my own, but no other certified appraiser, which seems to be of interest here. But I definitely had some real estate folks in town who agreed with me that if there were a multi-use option on that property, there would be more value there.
Okay. And those were just folks who sell real estate, is that correct?
Or develop.
Okay. So is it your testimony that you shared the appraisal with Mr. Gordon some months after the lawsuit was filed? Okay. And then do you recall being named as it's called a 30B6 deponent for Good Schools Missoula? That you were identified as a person who had specific knowledge about certain allegations of the complaint?
I recall that experience with you, yes.
Okay, good. And do you recall the topics that you were identified to talk about?
The appraisal was one of them. I'm not sure all of them.
And the fair market value of Roosevelt, is that Roosevelt?
Okay.
Okay. Do you remember testifying that that you were not aware of Mr. Gordon's opinion regarding the appraisal, that Mr. Andes was the only person who had that information?
I talked with Mr. Gordon about the appraisal. Maybe I didn't have it in my hand.
Okay. May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
I've asked you to read from line 5 down through line 23.
Question, okay, is Mr. Gordon an appraiser? Sorry. Is Mr. Gordon an appraiser in Missoula? No, he's an appraiser out of town. And where is out of town? In Austin, Texas. Okay, has Mr. Gordon reviewed this report? He has reviewed the report. And does Mr. Gordon have any experience appraising property in Missoula, Montana that you're aware of? No, I do not believe so. Okay, have you had a conversation with Mr. Gordon regarding this report? Actually, I have not. Do you know who has? My attorney has. And he hasn't shared the information with you? Not at the moment. Okay.
So at this time, your attorney had in his possession evidence regarding Mr. Gordon's opinion regarding the appraisal, and he chose not to share that with you.
I didn't ask.
Objection, I call it speculation.
Overruled. You can answer.
I didn't ask him.
Okay, and when you were given notice that you were going to be called as a 30B6 opponent, were you told that you were the individual who was supposed to have the information to answer these questions regarding Good Schools Missoula allegations?
What I was told is there was a fairly brief period of time to get ready for this deposition. And of the set of people that we had, who would probably be the one who had the most information at that time? And I said myself, I didn't say I was an expert appraiser or any of that.
Okay, but you were aware that your attorney was the only person who had this information at that time, is that correct?
I'm sorry, which information?
Regarding Mr. Gordon's opinion about the appraisal.
Okay.
Okay, and you chose not to ask him for that information to prepare for that deposition.
Yeah, because again, that wasn't my understanding of what was going on. I was going to tell you as much as I did know. I wasn't aware that I was going to be bringing an official rebuttal to the appraisal.
Okay, did Mr. Andes tell you that you were responsible as a 30B6 opponent to be knowledgeable about the topics identified in the notice?
Yeah, I felt I was knowledgeable.
Okay, but you were aware of the fact that Mr. Andes had specific information he wasn't sharing with you?
Objection asked and answered.
Overruled. You can answer it.
It's a hard question to answer because I don't think he wasn't sharing it with me. I don't think there was like, I'm withholding information from you. I think what happened is Bill told me after I talked to him, he'd be willing to talk to our attorney. And that was fine, and he did. And that was that's what happened in my mind. So.
Okay, at this point, was Mr. Andes, to your knowledge, a member of Good Schools Missoula?
No.
Is he now?
No. That's why I'm saying I was of the membership, the person that had the knowledge to be designated.
Okay. And so you disagreed with Mr. Stevens' appraisal based on your personal opinion and conversations you've had with other individuals, is that correct? Okay. And to your knowledge, has any other appraiser given an opinion in this case on the record regarding that appraisal?
On the record, meaning in the briefs and here today.
Has it been disclosed in any way, shape, or form, another appraiser's opinion?
Well, like I say, Mr. Gordon talked to Mr. Andes, but other than that,
But you
no.
couldn't share that information, correct? You didn't
Myself-
have that
I
information?
myself personally, no.
Okay. Okay, and did you, and I think Mr. Snyder may have asked you, I just wanted to clarify this. Did you carefully review the other proposals or offers that came in regarding this property?
I sat through the meetings where they were discussed.
Okay, let's back up. So those meetings where they were discussed were public meetings, is that correct? Okay, and you were present? Okay. And so based on your presence at those meetings, did you feel you had a good working knowledge of those offers or those proposals?
Yes, I did. I do think I did. It's certainly not at some detail level, perhaps, that reading them would have helped, but I wasn't offered them to read, so.
Okay. In front of you, you have exhibit number 58, which is going to be hard to tell because probably it says public notice on it. It's a simple piece of paper.
Okay.
Okay. And can you read that first paragraph for me, please?
Missoula County Public Schools trustees are interested in receiving proposals from any individual or organization that may be interested in purchasing the building and land at 503 Edith Street, known as Roosevelt School.
Okay. Now, aside from the Little Sacred Heart Foundation, did any other entity offer to purchase the property outright for more than what the foundation offered the school district?
So you're distinguishing between buying an option
Yes,
and
I am.
purchasing?
Yes.
My understanding is that the third proposal by Mr. Smith said they would match whatever amount was offered by the Catholic schools. But I don't know the detail of how he was generating the resource to do that.
Okay, so you're not aware if that individual was able to actually come forth with a legitimate offer to purchase the property for more than what the foundation offered?
My memory of this, and indeed its memory, is that he asked for an opportunity to do that, and it didn't happen.
Okay. Did he comply with the sealed, or the bid solicitation process, to your knowledge?
I don't know.
Okay, that's all I have.
Thanks, Evan.
Very briefly, Your Honor. Judy, do you have personal experience or professional experience with development, financing, appraising, and construction of real estate at all?
I have some. I've been on the board of Homeward, which is an affordable housing developer here and in Billings, and I was actually an interim director of that organization.
So what was your experience with those activities that I just mentioned? If you could summarize it briefly.
Basically, looking at to buy property that could be used for affordable housing, getting a sense of what the financing options are, putting together deals, packaging funds, that kind of thing.
So do you consider yourself a reasonably knowledgeable consumer about real estate issues?
Yes, although I'm certainly not a real estate agent.
No further questions. Thank you.
Nothing for the honor?
Anything further?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mason. Council, it's time for lunch. We'll start at 1 o'clock. Close your books there if you wouldn't mind. I've got to set bail for juveniles who are arrested this weekend. Quarter to 1.
We can pack after.
No, that's okay. You can just, as long as you don't have any sharp objects. I only have 4. So it should be done and ready to go by 1.
It's an item of discussion frequently.
Okay. And do you recall the board receiving public comment regarding this topic?
Yes.
Okay. Have any of the individuals who identified themselves as Good Schools Missoula's members or Carol Bellin offered comment regarding this topic?
Yes.
Okay. And do you recall the board determining that they were going to ask the public to vote on whether or not to sell Roosevelt's?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And in what way did the board address that issue?
Well, there was a lot of discussion about whether or not the building should be sold, and we wanted to be sure that there was public support for that, and that if we wanted to move to those discussions in a formal way, that we did it in the right way, a thoughtful way, and a public way.
Was the board also at this time discussing any intent with regard to keeping the building used as a public school?
Yes. I believe that decision had been made before I was elected to the board.
But that was an ongoing topic of conversation.
Yes, it was.
And did the board eventually pass a resolution calling for an election?
Yes, it did.
Okay. Tony, were you a member of the board that voted on that resolution?
Yes, I was.
Okay. And when did that resolution go to the public for a vote?
I believe it was on the November ballot, November of 2004. I'm not good with dates, so I believe that's accurate, but I'm not entirely positive. Is that right?
Well, Your Honor, may I approach you? Tony, I'm going to hand you a document, ask you if you can identify that document for me.
Yes, I can. It was November 2004.
Can you tell me what that document is?
It's an official ballot for Missoula County Elementary District Number 1 Site Disposal Proposition. So the purpose of the election is to authorize the trustees of Missoula Elementary District 1 to sell Roosevelt School and 2.3 acres.
Okay. In your opinion, did this resolution or this ballot obligate the school, the district, to sell that building?
No, it was an authorization.
Okay. And did the public or did this ballot put any terms on the sale or the proposed sale of that?
No, it didn't.
Okay. How did the district proceed at this point?
You mean after the election or when we made the decision to put this on the ballot?
when you made the decision to put this on the ballot?
The discussion at that time was, let us see if the perception that we have that there is tremendous public support for this is accurate.
And did
And
the
let
board,
the public speak to us.
and did the board continue to discuss whether or not to sell Roosevelt during its meetings leading up to the election?
Yes.
Okay. And what was the outcome of the election?
Well, as I recall, there was about a 70% yes for authorizing the sale of Roosevelt. It was a very strong statement from the community.
Following the resolution process and the public authorized the sale, how did the district proceed at that point, to your knowledge?
Excuse me, well, we decided that we would proceed with the process of selling the building, since we had great support from the community.
Okay. And did the board determine it was appropriate to seek sealed bids? at that
It did.
point? And do you recall who the district staff were who were de facto in charge of handling that process?
I believe that this was a time when Bruce Moyer was still our business manager, and approximately the time when Pat McHugh came on to the district. I think we were in transition time with those two gentlemen as business officers.
Okay. And were you aware of public meetings that were held to discuss the bids that were received?
Yes,
Now, Tony, you were personally named in this lawsuit, is that correct?
that's correct.
And asked that you be surcharged for any alleged loss in value, is that correct?
Correct.
At any time during this process, were you acting outside the course and scope of your authority as a trustee?
No,
Individually, did you ever take any action?
no,
Are you aware of earlier litigation that was filed surrounding the closure, lease, and sale of Roosevelt School?
yes.
Okay. Starting with the lawsuit that was filed in 2005, do you recall who the parties to that lawsuit were?
Okay, now there were two lawsuits, and so I'm not sure who was involved in which one. They kind of run together for me. I believe, is that the one with Linda Smith and Molly Moody? Yes, okay.
Okay. And do you recall what their allegations were in that lawsuit?
I believe that they,
Let me ask that a different way. Do you recall being challenged on whether or not it was appropriate to seek a referendum?
yes, that's what it was. Thank you.
And to your knowledge, how was that lawsuit resolved?
Yeah, I think it was dismissed.
Okay. And to your knowledge, is Linda Smith a member of Good Schools Missoula?
To my knowledge, yes.
Okay. And during the course of this litigation, did you become aware of yet another lawsuit that was filed against the district regarding the closure and lease of Roosevelt?
Yes,
Okay. Do you recall that, and you weren't on the board at that time?
I was
correct?
not.
Okay. And during that litigation, do you recall that another set of parents filed to challenge the closure and lease of Roosevelt?
Yes,
Okay. Did you become aware of Janet Scott's involvement in that case?
yes,
Okay. And to your knowledge, is Janet Scott a member of Good Schools Missoula?
I believe so.
Okay. Mrs. Rabine, did you attend some of the depositions in this case?
I did.
Okay. Do you recall specific questions posed to Good Schools Missoula's members, asking them to provide a factual basis for their allegations?
I do.
And do you recall the responses?
Object, Your Honor, the record speaks for itself on this would be hearsay coming from this witness.
She's not asking for the responses, she's asking if she recalls responses. You can ask the question.
I do recall.
Okay. Tony, was it your impression that the members were able to substantiate any of the factual complaints they raised?
I don't remember that there was any substantiation.
Okay. Are you aware of how much money the district has spent in defending this litigation?
I believe it's around $30,000.
Those are all the questions I have.
Mrs. Mrs. Raymond, when you were sitting as a trustee on the board of public school boards, did you guys vote to sell the Roosevelt School property?
Yes, we did.
Okay, and was that a majority vote?
Yes,
And that vote was approving the sale of the Roosevelt School property?
it was.
Okay. Is it your opinion that the school board had the authority to sell the Roosevelt School property?
Yes, it is.
Further, Your Honor.
Examine.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Rabine, were personally named as a defendant in this case, I think you just testified,
Yes.
correct? Yes. Have you personally paid any money out of your own pocket for attorney's fees in this case?
I have not.
Those have been paid for by the district's insurance policy.
It has.
Were you present in the courtroom this morning for testimony with respect to a covenant on the sale of Roosevelt School?
Yes, I was.
Are you familiar with that covenant?
I couldn't quote it to you, but I have familiarity with it, yes.
So you're aware that that covenant requires Loyola to use the property exclusively for purposes of the school, right?
Yes, I am.
And are you also aware that that covenant expires on Loyola's resale of the school?
Yes, I am. I became aware this morning.
Oh, you weren't aware of that before?
No.
So is it fair to say that the board as a whole, to your knowledge, wasn't aware of that at the time you made the decision to sell the school?
I'm going to object, he's asking her to speculate whether board members of the board know or have knowledge of.
Ask her if she has knowledge, if you would, so she can.
Do you have knowledge as to whether or not it was brought to the board's attention at any meeting at which you attended, what the terms of that covenant were?
I really don't remember, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Probably was. I may have missed that meeting, I'm sorry.
So, but you yourself aren't familiar, is what you're saying. You can't speak for them.
Right, I can't speak for them.
Do you have any reason to disagree with the testimony of the witnesses this morning who said that they thought that covenant would make the school worth less to potential buyers in your role as a trustee?
Well, what I do recall and what I know to be true is that what we voted on is that the trustee, the school district has the right of first refusal if the Catholic schools ever decide they want to sell that. And that was a point that we discussed at length.
So you were aware of that provision being in
Yes.
there? Okay. But you weren't aware of the restriction that they could only use it for a school?
I was aware of that as well.
Oh, and that. So the part you weren't familiar with was the fact that that restriction would expire when the Catholics resell it, right?
That's right.
At the time of the election, school election, where the sale of Roosevelt was approved, at that point in time, the Catholics had not yet exercised their lease renewal option, had they?
I am not clear about the timeline.
You don't remember?
Right.
I'm going to show you Exhibit 24. This is a Missoulian article. I asked you if you saw that article on or about the time it was published.
What was your question, please, sir?
Did you see that article on or about the time it was published?
Probably, because I read the paper every day.
Okay. You don't recall having seen it, though.
That's 5 years ago. Sorry.
So, it's hard to remember 5 years, sure.
It is for me.
So it's probably fair to assume you don't recall this article being discussed among board members at the time, do you?
I'm sorry, I don't.
Fair enough. No further questions, thank you.
Redirect.
Briefly.
Mrs. Rabine, is it your understanding that Montana law requires that the school district identify trustees acting in the course and scope of their authority?
Say that again?
Is it your understanding that Montana law requires that the public school identify individual trustees who are acting in the course and scope of their authority as trustees?
Yes.
Is the board bound in any way by the opinion page of the Missoula?
No.
Okay. Okay, that's it.
Ms. Rabine, do you recall discussions during public school board meetings concerning the use of the property after it was sold.
Yes,
Was there concerns with the board members regarding, or, sorry, Ken, was there concerns keeping it a school after it was sold?
yes,
Did that weigh into your decision?
absolutely.
Are you aware if that weighed into the decision of anyone else on the board?
Well, I'm aware of it because there was discussion about it.
Can you call specifically any members that might have raised that concern?
Well, I can remember that generally, I mean, I don't remember who said what, but there certainly was a concern among the members of the board that it remain a school, and that's why the right of first refusal should the Catholic Diocese decide to sell it was important to us.
And is Jenda Hemphill, she was on the board when you were on the board?
Yes, she was.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Handing you what's been marked as Exhibit 34. You want to just review that briefly?
Thank you.
Can you summarize just briefly what that is?
This is an opinion of one of the, a person who was trustee at the time, saying that it's very important that the school remain a school and that all of the things that were mentioned earlier this morning, that it can't be a place of access to the community, that it be a polling place, the playground has community use, all those things, and that we, the school district, has the right of first refusal are very important to this board member.
Okay, and who is that board member?
Jenda Hemphill
Okay, does that refresh your memory whether Jenda raised those issues in board meetings?
certainly does.
Okay. Your Honor, I also object to the admission of Exhibit 24. There's no
Hasn't been
foundation.
offered.
They were offered at the very start. This is part of the stack you got.
Okay.
There's no foundation or laid with respect to this case, and it's completely irrelevant then.
They haven't offered it for now. I mean, you gonna offer it again at some time? or-
I will.
Okay, so we'll wait till.
Okay. Well, just to clear the record, my understanding was that he was going to admit all those documents, and they would be admitted unless we raised an objection.
But it has to come in at a point. It hasn't.
Oh,
come in
certainly.
yet.
Certainly. If he lays foundation later, I don't have a problem. I just didn't know if he was going to do
I mean, like, you think it's not printed in Missoula?
It's certainly a public document, but I would raise my objection as to relevancy to this case if the board never discussed it or knew it existed. No further questions?
Questions, Emily? Two areas of inquiry. Is it correct that at the time that the sale approached, you and the board were aware that there was some challenges to selling? Or did you think that the passage of the referendum and the dismissal of the two lawsuits put all that to rest? Where was the board on that?
Well, the board as a whole, as we discussed it and made our comments about it, believed that we were doing the will of the public by selling it.
I understand that,
Okay.
but up to that point, you would have what I would call an aggressive minority.
Yes, we did.
And so with the aggressive minority out on the edge,
Yes.
watching what you were doing, it became time to sell.
Mhm.
And who was advising the board as to the way to sell?
The administration.
And what did the administration tell you about what you needed to do in order to have a sale that would stand up under the scrutiny of those complainers on the edge?
That we needed to make it open to everyone, and that we would listen to all offers.
And so did they have a procedure that they presented to you, like, let me tell you where I'm going. You get a piece of property worth $1.5 million.
Right.
If you own that piece of property, or any of us in this room had a piece of property that's $1.5 million, I'd send notices to New York, San Francisco, you name it. Valley Christian School, Seventh-day Adventist, right on down the line, anybody I could get my hands on, right? Make sense?
Yep.
$1.5 million. Did you do that?
it was made public that the building was for sale. And there
Do they
had
read
been,
your Missoula in New York, San Francisco, Seattle, and Salt Lake City? I think not. What do you mean by, do you think that one notice in the paper does the job? Or 4 times you publish?
and it was, the information was available on the district website, and it was widely known for a period of time that we were contemplating the sale.
But you understand my question? Is that you knew you were under the scrutiny,
Correct.
and the administration said to you, or did they, do this right, dot the i's, cross the t's, because they're going to be on us if we do it wrong.
Mhm.
Did they tell you that?
No,
Did you know that?
I knew that.
Did the board know that?
I'm guessing that if I knew what other members knew, and I don't know the board as a whole, I can't speak for them.
But you knew that you were being watched and there was public interest in this.
Yes, I did.
So what I'm hearing from the plaintiffs here is that you didn't follow a procedure that would bring in a lot of high bids. Show me that they're wrong.
There was generally speaking, there's very little interest in purchasing empty school buildings.
Right.
In-
Except by other schools or churches.
Correct, in the state and in the country. And that when school buildings are empty and remain empty, they become white elephants and a target for vandalism.
Right.
We knew what the appraisal was, and we're interested in a fair offer and money that the district seriously needed. And so we were interested in listening to all fair and reasonable offers that came our way. I wanted to do what was in the best interest of the school district and our children.
Did you ever send it out to any subdividers?
I believe that there were people in the building industry who were very much aware that this piece of property was for sale.
Prove it.
I can't. I'd have to bring that person in and have to talk to you.
See, that's what they're complaining about,
Uh-huh.
is that the school is not showing any proof that they really worked the market.
I see.
I heard that this morning. Did you hear that?
Well, I heard that we were speedy, and
Yeah.
I don't think we were speedy.
Yeah,
And
well,
I think this was talked about for a long time.
And that's one component of what I'll call working the market.
Okay.
Whether it's getting the notices, and then you get one guy that wants to buy it after the current lease is over, and I haven't heard anything like, well, we made him a counteroffer, and then he stood firm, and then we made him another counteroffer, and he just moved a little bit, and, I'm not hearing any of that.
Mhm.
So how do you respond to their complaint of it was too speedy, there wasn't enough notice out to people, there wasn't a lot of negotiations and back and forth and trying to push the price up, et cetera?
Mhm. Well, I would say that the process was not speedy, that the board had talked about, and it was publicized for years, the interest of selling. The referendum was on the ballot, and there was a lot of publicity at that time about whether or not the school should be sold, and the fact that the board was seeking interest from the community.
And then, yeah, go ahead.
And then, when it was made public that we were interested in soliciting offers,
Yeah.
3 offers came in. One was a solid cash offer. One was a $20,000 with an option to buy at the end of the lease, if they have the money.
I'm aware of that.
And the third one was, well, we'd like to buy it if we have the money at the end of the lease. So those weren't solid offers. There was only one realistic offer. And it's my belief that people had a long period of time in which to make their interest known if they...
After it finally was, like, okay, we got the referendum passed, we made a decision, we're going to market it.
Mhm.
How much time went by from what you call official notice that we're going to market it
Mhm.
until you close the deal with the foundation?
A couple of months.
$1.5 million.
Mhm.
You Was there or council, maybe you can tell me, and I thought you were going to have her do this, a formal method of soliciting offers?
Your Honor, that witness is going to be coming in through Pat McHugh. Tony Rabine is testifying as a trustee. She was not involved in the actual process put together by the staff, and I wasn't calling her for that purpose. So a lot of these questions are
Okay.
better answered
So
by
that
Pat.
person will be able to
Yes.
sit. Second part of my questions is you were concerned that that you wanted it to continue as a school or public access.
Mhm.
And that's why you insisted on the right of first refusal. And so the right of first refusal would enable you to, in the event that the foundation says, okay, we're going to sell this, now that that lease is over, we're going to sell this. That would have enabled you to say, I'll match that offer that you were going to sell, and we want to build everything back. Did you think that they would sell it and put a school restriction on it? So essentially, you pay them, I'll pay you back the $1.5 million that you paid me, or were they going to sell it to some subdivider who is not bound by the school restrictions for $4 million, $3 million, $2 million? What do you think? What was the board thinking there? You understand what my question is?
Yeah.
You have a right of first refusal,
Yes.
and it comes back to you, well, school district, we got a good deal at $3 million. Match it. Of course you can't. You don't want to. So what's the point of having a right of first refusal if you have this clause that, a little other add on the end saying you can sell to anybody you want?
Well, my understanding is that we buy back for what it was paid for.
Is that the right of first refusal? Is that what you were thinking?
Uh-huh.
Is that correct? That they get to pay $1.5 million and get it back, even though the trustees had the right to sell it for who knows what?
Well, Your Honor, they certainly had the right to sell it for whatever they wanted, but I think the district's intent was very clear. They wanted it used as a school, and they would use whatever means
No, my
necessary.
question was,
I don't think the right of first refusal itself says they have to buy it back for the actual purchase price, no. But
the
that's
actual
certainly
purchase price of the new buyer.
of the new buyer. But they have the right of first refusal, so if the foundation receives an offer on the property, the district has the right to come in and match that offer.
Yeah, and that's not the same as what the foundation paid for it. We're talking the $3 million that my hypothetical $3 million.
But truly, hypothetically, we could say anything we want at this point. I think what the trustees at the time, what Tony's testifying to, is the trustees at the time believed that if Loyola got to the point they did not want to use that building anymore, that they would exercise their right to sell that building free of the restrictive covenant, and that the school district had the right to come back in and match the offer if they were able to sell it.
Yeah,
If they were able to, when we know the appraisal, at this point the trustees knew the appraised value of the property is $1.45 million.
so you hear what she just said? Which is that if the foundation has the chance to sell it down the road a ways, sell it free and clear to the subdivider for $3 million, you got to match it, $3 million. So was the board under the misapprehension that they could suddenly get it back if it wasn't school anymore?
Okay, Your Honor, can I interject that? We're asking Tony to talk about what the board thought, and I think she's been real clear she
Okay,
can't do that.
she just told me that she thought that they could buy it back at $1.5 million.
Well, but she's not the board. She's one individual member of the board.
Well, if she thought that, can we reasonably conclude that the other members thought that as well? Or was she the only one that was out there in left field with a strange thought about getting her cake and eating it too?
Well, I'll tell you why I think that, and that's based on the appraisal that we received, and that is that public school buildings don't sell for much money. And I have no reason to believe that the building has appraised. We were also told that there was about 10 to 15 years of good life left in the building, so that the value of the building would diminish with time rather than increase.
I ask these questions because they make a big point
I
out of
understand.
that little slippery clause that went in there, and
Yes.
somebody put it in,
Mhm.
and I'm wondering, I don't know who put it in, but sure is nice for the foundation, that they can sell it free and clear of any of the things that you, the board, wanted to impose on that restriction of keep it as a school, keep it. With me?
I'm with you.
So I'm looking for who knew what, when did they know it? And what I'm hearing so far from the board, that you remember, is that you thought you could have it back for $1.5 million.
Well, we really believe, I believed, and I think with the information that we've been given, and also that we've heard today, is that that building is not going to appreciate. Unless the, current owners put lots and lots and lots of money into it. I don't think that's going to happen.
It's pretty clear the right of first refusal says that the board has to pay whatever the foundation has got from the new
Right,
buyer.
they have to match the offer, right.
Council, do you have any questions in view of mine?
No, I think I'll address those through subsequent witnesses.
Thank you, Mr. Bell.
Okay.
Call your next witness.
The council calls Pat McHugh.
Please step right up and raise your right hand and be sworn.
Do you solemnly swear that this testimony may be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Please have a seat right here.
Can you state your name for the record, please?
Sure, Pat McHugh.
Okay. And Pat, what's your current occupation?
I'm the Director of Business Services for Missoula County Public Schools.
And how long have you held that position?
Since January of 2005,
Okay. And what did you do for a living prior to joining Missoula County Public Schools?
I practiced law in Missoula.
And Pat, when you started working with Missoula County Public Schools, what was the status of the Roosevelt School building?
They had published a notice for prospective purchasers in December, so that deadline was the end of January, I believe. So that publication was already in place.
Okay. Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
Pat, there was a question raised earlier about whether or not the district's publication was satisfactory pursuant to law, and I'd ask if you'd review that statute, please. Pat, are you familiar with the statute?
It looks familiar, but
Okay. Could you read it over briefly then for me, and looking at subsection 4 in particular? Could you summarize that for us?
yeah, it references in terms of whether or not an agency shall comply with the notice provisions if a newspaper of general circulation affected by a decision has carried the news story sufficiently prior to the final decision to permit public comment.
Okay. And in front of you, you should have a document entitled Exhibit 58, I believe.
I do.
Okay. And have you seen that before?
I have.
Okay. Can you identify that document for us?
This is the public notice, copy of what was published in the paper.
Okay. So the district did comply with 2-3-104, subsection 4, in your opinion, by publishing in the newspaper?
Yes, and this notification was taken before I began.
Okay. Very good. Very good. Now, were you present for the last exchange regarding how the district noticed or advertised its sale of property?
I was.
Okay. Is there anything in 2-3-104 that requires a public school to, say, solicit bids from out of state or solicits bids out of the country?
There's not.
Okay. May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
I'm going to hand you another statute, which is referred to in the statute I just showed you, and ask if you could review that briefly.
Okay.
Okay. Pat, you attended meetings after January of 2005 for the Missoula County Public Schools, is that correct?
I have.
Okay. And were you present when public comment was solicited regarding the proposed bids to sell?
I was.
Okay, and Pat, I guess we need to probably talk about, a little bit about, okay, how we got to the point where we were selling this property. And I know that you didn't start until January of 2005. So the first thing I will do is ask you if you could, and in front of you there should be some, and I'm not sure if it's still there, but it would be Exhibit 8, which would be a lease.
I don't see
It's
that.
not there, okay, I'll hand that to you. Okay. Prior to today, have you had an opportunity to review that document?
I have.
Okay. And is it your understanding that the terms of that lease gave Missoula Catholic Schools the ability to renew that lease on their option?
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay. Was there any timeline in that document for when they had to renew that lease?
There's not.
Okay. So when the terms of the initial lease expired, were the Missoula County Public Schools leasing the property on a month-to-month basis based on the terms of that lease?
I believe they were.
Okay. So when they exercised their option to renew, they did so under the terms of that lease?
Right.
Okay.
Same terms of the as the
Same
original
terms.
lease?
Same terms.
Did I say? What paragraph?
You have your lease in front of you. That's actually my copy, I'm sorry. Exhibit, please. I can tell you right now. If you look at paragraph 3.
There's 2 3s on the first page.
Okay, I'm sorry, the second 3, under the now therefore, thank you.
So they could renew it for one term,
For an additional 5 years.
up to 5 years, but no later than June of '09.
Exactly.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Your Honor, just so we can get the record clear, you asked the question whether they had the same lease rate, and if you look at paragraph 4, in fact, it's not the same lease rate.
They started at $60,000 a year,
Right.
and then the new one, subsequent term would be 70.
Right.
So it goes up 10,000.
The financial rate would increase, but the other terms of the lease would remain the same. Pat, can you tell me what your role was in the bid solicitation process, understanding that you came into this in January?
Yeah, there was a committee of Bruce Moyer, my predecessor, and Carl Jones, the supervisor of central services, and they had mostly Bruce, I guess, as the predecessor, had, in response to the board's request, run this public notice to request proposals for interested parties wishing to purchase the property. And so I worked with Bruce then after that public notice.
Okay. And did you review the bids that were received?
Yes.
Okay. And did the district receive inquiries from other individuals who chose not to submit bids that you're aware of?
You know, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I think that there were inquiries, but you know, the direction on the public notice wasn't to contact me, and I think that folks may have contacted Dr. Clark or Bruce Moyer.
Okay. So when the deadline came, or January 31st, how many bids have the district received?
They received 3 after that deadline.
Okay. And was there a process in place for the individuals who were submitting bids?
Well, after they submitted the bids, then we held public meetings with each of the submitters and talked about the proposed process for selection of the bid.
Okay.
And that process entailed, or at least the initial meeting entailed, describing when we'd meet again. And we did meet again as a collective group of 3, all 3 bidders, to outline the process.
Okay. And those were all public meetings, is that right?
They were.
And were they noticed up, to your knowledge, they noticed up using MCPS as normal procedures for noticing bids?
To my knowledge, that's correct.
Okay. When you met with each of the individuals who solicited bids, were any of the other individuals who submitted bids, were any of them offering to purchase the property at that time, except for the foundation?
Right. No, they weren't. There was an offer, I believe, and And I didn't look closely at the bids that were submitted after that public notice deadline, but I believe the one was for possible payment in December at the end of the year, closing at that time. And then the other one was an option to purchase for a strike price, and then the immediate offer to purchase. I believe that was submitted in a letter even prior to this public notice by the foundation or by the Catholic schools.
Okay. So the foundation offered to purchase the property for $1.5 million, is that correct?
They offered, I believe the bid after this public notice was 1.45.
From the foundation?
Correct. It wasn't until the best and final offer was asked. And so that was the following part of our process, was that we met with the three proposers. We set deadlines for them to ask questions. We offered a form for them to submit an offer, and then gave a deadline for that offer to be submitted in a sealed bid.
Okay. So during that time, you had public conversations with the solicitors and permitted them to amend their bids if they so chose after a certain
Yes,
conversation?
the initial response to this public notice, as much as anything, identified the three interested parties. The public notice discussed parties who would be interested in purchasing the property. The one submittal was a option to purchase, and then we met individually in a public setting or public meeting with each of the proposers and identified or developed the process that entailed the sealed bid using a standard form that all parties would use.
Okay. And at any point during this process, did any party come to you and offer you a different appraisal or objections to Mr. Stevens' appraisal?
No.
Let me make sure I understand what you're saying. So when you got the three bids, you then told the public that we've got these three bids, and then you told the public that at our next meeting or at some time, we are going to discuss these with the three bidders. We've got to call them three bidders.
Three bidders,
Three
yeah.
bidders. And that we could have public comment at that time.
Yeah, and I think the order of events was after we received the bids, we met with one of the bidders and had scheduled meetings with the other two, then had and this was a public meeting, the one with one of the bidders, then we had a meeting with the board.
Public meeting with notice to the public beforehand.
Correct.
Like on Tuesday night, we're going to talk to the foundation about their bid and et cetera.
Right, right. And then we had a finance and operations meeting and identified the dates that were for we were going to have with the other two bidders. And these were just to provide a timeline to finish the process or to continue the process.
Pat, from the point you got involved, did you feel it was rushed in any manner?
No, not from the point I got.
Was the foundation's bid to purchase the property the highest bid received by the district?
Yes, it was their bid was, there were two bids after the three bids were submitted. The other two bidders combined to create an option to purchase bid, or they joined forces to make that bid. Really, it's apples and oranges. I'm not sure if it's fair to really describe the highest bidder. They were the only bid to purchase the property. The other bid was an option to purchase the property.
Okay. And when you solicited bids from the public, as in the public notice, you were requesting bids to purchase the property, is that correct?
We were, but after we received the bids, it wasn't as if we excluded options to purchase. And I think the trustees made it clear that they weren't compelled to sell to any of the bidders. And that was the message we conveyed when we met with each of the individual bidders, was that there's no obligation to sell, and that it's possible the bidders or the trustees will not accept a bid if it's not full replacement value of the property, which at the time was about $3.5 million, or identified at that amount. And that may have just been a trustee throwing that number out.
Just for full replacement value?
That's correct, but the point is that the message was conveyed to the bidders that you're going to have an opportunity to submit a sealed bid, one final bid, your best and final offer, and there's no obligation by the trustees to accept any of the bids.
Okay. And after those bids were opened, did the administration make a recommendation to the board, to your knowledge?
Not after the bids were opened. The bids were presented to the Finance and Operations Committee, and the bids were enclosed or offered in their amounts, and administration wasn't making a recommendation. The agenda offered to make a recommendation at the meeting, the possibility of making a recommendation.
Can I interrupt you a minute? You said that the Finance Committee, is that what it's called?
The Finance and Operations.
Finance and Operations Committee, right. But you had a meeting and you discussed sending some information to the other two bidders.
When we have the Finance and Operations Committee meeting once a month, and the first meeting, as I recall, after we received the bids, we identified the three bidders and indicated we had met with one of the bidders and had scheduled meetings with the other two. And between that finance meeting and the next one, and maybe the one after that, there was the sealed bid process, the question process, and then we presented the final best offers from the two remaining bidders.
What kind of notice did you give to the public so they could participate when you had the Finance Committee meetings?
You know, we do a standard, that's a standing committee meeting. It's the same time every month, same time. The notice is via website, and I don't believe that we don't publish that notice as a standard in the Missoula County.
You know why I asked this?
Why?
You don't.
Well, you're going to talk about whether or not we have an obligation to post the newspaper.
I asked this because of the case out of Yellowstone County.
Yes.
They had the Finance Committee, and was it Finance Committee? I think it was a Finance or Closure Committee, something like that. They called it that.
It was the school closure committee for Rimrock.
Yeah. And they were a committee appointed by the board to work through the closure of the school there in Billings.
Yes.
Yellowstone County. And so the Supreme Court said in that case that they have to meet the requirements of the board itself.
Right.
And so I'm looking.
And I can actually do that with policy if you.
Oh, okay.
Okay. We talked about the statute, but now I can bring it in through policy, but the actual requirements are posted.
So you will show me that his committee that he had met the statutory requirements.
You want to do that right now? Just cut to the
Anytime
chase?
you want.
Okay, Pat, we're gonna.
Every question needs to be answered.
Exactly. We're gonna jump a little bit now. You've got in front of you the two statutes that's, and I'm gonna call your attention to 104 in particular. 23104.
Okay.
Does 104 require publication in a newspaper in order to effect notice of a public meeting?
Doesn't look like it requires it. It looks like there's various options.
Okay. In fact, it's a presumption if you publish in a newspaper, is that correct?
I'm sorry.
If you look at number 4, is posting a presumption of service?
Yeah, it says an agency shall be considered to have complied if the newspaper of general circulation within the area affected. Is that what you mean?
Yes. But the statute doesn't require it, is that accurate?
That's right.
Okay. May I approach now?
Yeah.
And I can have you look at board policy 1400. And can you tell me if you've ever seen this before?
I have.
Okay. Can you look at the posting requirement for the special meetings, of which committee meetings fall under?
The second paragraph?
Yes, please.
Yes.
Does the policy require publication in the newspaper?
No, just to those that have filed a written request for such notice.
Okay. And to your knowledge, does Missoula County Public Schools post their board meetings or committee meetings in the same fashion on a monthly basis?
They do. It's the same fashion, routine fashion.
And is that notice posted on the front door of the 6th Street building?
It is.
Is that notice posted conspicuously on the front door of the South Avenue building?
It is.
And is that notice published on the district's webpage?
It is.
Okay. And does the district routinely make note during its board meetings and during other publications that it will post notices of meetings on its webpage?
It does.
Pat, did anyone file any kind of open meeting law challenge, whether or not your board meetings or your committee meetings were appropriately noticed?
No, they did not.
Well, let's go back to 1400.
Okay.
So do we agree that the finance committee fits under a special meeting?
It generally falls under a special meeting, yes.
And written notice of that meeting was delivered to each trustee prior to the meeting?
Yes.
And you've talked about written notice being posted conspicuously within the district in a manner that will receive public attention.
Yes.
Is the manner in which the sale of the school was published, I don't know whether they put it on signs on the street or whatever like that, was that same procedure followed for the special meetings of his committee? Like sometimes the school board will have a meeting and they'll put up a sign down at the whatever store or whatever, and they'll put it around and they'll put it on the as you go in the playground. Did they do that when they were going to have the board meeting to talk about sale?
The board meeting, absolutely.
Did they do the same thing when they had a special meeting of his committee, posted in the same fashion?
With the exception of being able to publish in the Missoulian. Yes, the board doesn't, for special meetings that are called, the board doesn't routinely publish in the Missoulian, but they do advertise through their website, on their buildings. Postings are sent to building level principals. That's the manner in which they communicate.
I noticed that written notice shall also be sent no less than 24 hours prior to the meeting to every newspaper, radio, or television set that has filed a written request for such notices. Anybody file a written request?
I don't know. And not that I know of. I mean, if they had, they would have been sent to them. That's the practice of the district
Proven.
office. Well, the secretary who used to work for the district is no longer working for the district. And Your Honor, this is an open meeting law question.
Well, I'm reading here, it says, if you're going to have a special meeting and somebody's asked for notice, you got to give them the written notice.
Right. Right. I mean, I can go back to the district and find out if any written request was received.
If you're going to fault them, plaintiffs, you have to dot the i's, cross the t's. That's what I'm doing here.
But they haven't filed an open meeting objection to this case, Your Honor.
They're saying, yeah, I know that, but they're saying we didn't get notice. This is not a technical thing about we object, open meeting. What you're saying is you should never have filed this lawsuit.
Right.
And they're saying, we didn't know what was going on. You never told us anything.
Except Judy Smith testified that she sat through these meetings. And she's a member of Good Schools Missoula.
Of every one of his meetings?
She didn't say she sat through every single one of them, but I think we could call her back up and ask her how many she did.
You're weak in this area. I'm telling you, I'm warning you, you're weak in this area.
Okay. Well, I can bring a staff
You
member
can
in
do
and
whatever
talk
you
about
want. I'm just telling you, you're weak in this area because they're complaining they didn't have enough notice about what was going on.
But the question is there a legal basis for them to file a lawsuit when they don't have any proof that there wasn't
And
notice?
that may be true, that they may not have had a legal basis because they didn't object because open meeting law, but that's not the total test, legal basis, if they had a reasonable basis to believe it was legal. Don't you agree with that?
Very true, and I'd be more than happy to bring in someone to testify to that.
No. See, you're the one that wants the attorney fees, so you've got the burden here. You need to carry the burden. And
Your Honor, if I
yeah, yeah.
may. In respect to the 24-hour notice, the written notice, we do send those notices routinely to the newspaper, whatever reporter is covering this school district. That doesn't mean it gets posted, it's just that.
I think that's the whole idea
Courtesy.
here is that as a courtesy, you send them, we're going to have the playground committee, we're going to have the finance committee, and they don't, we haven't got time for that sort of stuff. But if they want this stuff, they will have sent you a letter that they're requesting it is indicative that they're probably going to publish it if they ask for it and you send it to them.
And we do. Yeah, we do send those. At this point in time, we would have sent those to Rob Cheney from the Missoulian. But I can't say here that I know it was sent. That's just our routine practice to send it to the Missoulian. Go ahead.
I guess, as a point of clarification, I guess, is the actual, have you reviewed the complaint in this matter?
No, I haven't. If I did, it was briefly quite a while ago.
Okay, but you sat through the board meetings when members of Good Schools Missoula or other individuals objected to the sale in general?
Yes.
Okay. It wasn't based on a lack of notice, was it?
No.
Okay, was it based on the fact that they believed that this decision was rushed?
What I recall is it based upon a valuation or the amount that it was sold for.
Okay. The complaint itself, though, doesn't say that the board didn't comply with the open meeting law in holding these meetings, does it?
No, not that I recall.
Okay, Pat, after the two bids were evaluated, were you present when the board made the decision to accept the bid from the foundation?
I was.
Okay. And do you recall the discussion the board had at that time?
Well, I recall that there's what I recall is based upon my review of the minutes, the discussion that was had at the Finance and Operations Committee and the board meeting that followed the Finance Committee. The bulk of the discussion was had at the Finance Committee meeting, and then the recommendation was made to forward it to the board with approval to sell to the foundation.
Okay. And members of the public were present at your meetings, or were able to be present at your meetings that you had with the three bidders?
Right.
Okay. Do you recall seeing Judy Smith at any of those meetings?
I do, and I know that the meeting minutes reflect quite a number of quite a level of participation by members of the public. I do recall the reference to her participation, I believe, in those two meetings, both the F&O meeting in March and then the board meeting.
Okay, so that leads me to my next question. That the F&O meeting likewise had public participation at it, is that correct?
It did.
Participation at the meeting. Okay, yeah. That was a bad way to say it. But was there public participation at the F&O meetings?
Yes, there
Discuss the
was.
sale, okay. And was there public participation at the board meeting to discuss the sale of the property?
Yes, there was.
At any time, again, has there been a concern that you didn't adequately post your meetings as required by law?
No, I don't recall having expressed concerns about that.
Okay. Did a representative from the Missoulian, whether it be Rob or someone else, attend any of these meetings?
Yes.
Okay, let's talk about the two actual, I guess, bids themselves.
Okay.
One was a bid to purchase, is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. And the second was an option to purchase the property at the end of 5 years, is that correct?
I believe it is closer to 4 years. I think that by the time the amendment to renew the lease had been approved in 2004, the lease end date was in May or June of each year, and so that would have placed the end date of the lease in May of '09. And I believe that bidder intended to purchase after the expiration of the lease.
Do you recall if there was any obligation listed in that bid to purchase the property at the end of that lease term?
Which bid?
Mr. Coors' bid.
Okay. Would you say that?
Do you recall if there was any obligation of that group to purchase the building?
No, it expressly stated in the offer that there was no obligation to purchase. His offer expressly stated that.
Okay. I think that's all I have.
Can I steal a glass of water?
Is it okay if I call you Pat?
Sure.
All right. Pat, were you involved in the actual drafting of the buy-sell agreement between the foundation and the public school?
I was.
Okay, were you involved in drafting the right of first refusal?
I was involved, yes.
Okay. And was your understanding that, as drafted, if the foundation chose to sell the building and property to someone else, that the public schools had the right to match that offer?
That's correct.
Okay, hypothetically, do you think it's fair that if the foundation purchased the building for $1.5 million and invested another $1.5 million to improve the property, and received an offer from a third party for $3 million, that if the public schools wanted to keep that building, they would have to pay the $3 million to return the foundation as $1.5 million in improvements.
I think that would be fair.
Everything, Senator.
Exactly.
Thank you. Mr. McHugh, I don't believe we've met. I'm Roy Andes. I understand you practiced law in Missoula
I did.
previously? What period of time? Were you here at the same time?
Through through 2004, when I took the job with the school district.
Okay. So you're starting with the school district was, do you remember the date, did you say?
It was right after the first of the year, so early January of 2005.
And so your involvement then with this particular Roosevelt process started, when did you say?
Well, it would have been probably after the deadline to submit the bids, so it would have been in February sometime.
Okay. So by the deadline to submit the bids, I'll show you,
Let's submit the proposals. I'm
oh, the
sorry.
proposal. So
Yeah, this was
that was
the-
the January 31st?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so I don't think I have that exhibit handy. I won't waste time looking for it. But you would have been involved in the drafting of Exhibit 35, calling for the final proposal?
You know, I was not. I believe Bruce Moyer drafted this.
Okay. So is it fair to say that Mr. Moyer did most of the administrative handling of the Roosevelt sale process?
It was up until the point of the selection of the party, the bidder.
Oh, up until the point of selection.
Yeah, I was involved, but he was primarily involved.
I see. So was he involved, would he then have been the primary contact with those bidders?
Not necessarily. It would have been either himself, myself, or Dr. Clark.
So all three of you were sort of handing off those duties, is that what you're saying?
No, but it's possible that up until the point of the bid submittals, which were requested to be provided to Dr. Clark, he would have been involved. At the point that the bids were received, then Bruce and I and Carl Jones would have been involved.
And when you say bids received, are you talking about the ones in response to Exhibit 35 or the previous ones from January 31st?
Both.
Okay, so the three of you became the district's team after January 31st? is what
That's
you're
right.
saying. Okay. Do you recall Mr. Corus ever expressing concern about feeling he was rushed, particularly at the last?
You know, I don't recall. I remember Mr. Corey's making a comment that he appreciated the effort of the school district, including myself and Mr. Moyer, and felt like it was well, and he also congratulated Loyola, as I recall, and was very gracious.
You're referring to his remarks made at the April 12th board meeting where the final approval was given to the sale?
Yeah, I believe that was part of where I heard his remarks, and then I would have talked with Mr. Corus after the selection as well.
You were present at that March 12th board meeting? were you
April
not?
12th board
April
meeting.
12th, sorry. And correct me if I'm wrong, I think that you had been asked to offer an opinion to somebody, perhaps maybe it was the Missoulian previously, with regard to comparing the two offers?
Oh, I'd be careful about classifying this as an opinion. I think that I was routinely asked for the status of what was going on, and so I would have responded to it.
Do you recall being misquoted in the Missoulian in making a comparison between the two offers?
Not entirely, but when I read through the minutes of the Finance and Operations meeting, I did make a comment in the minutes that says I wanted to clarify what was reported in Missoula.
Okay. And do you recall the nature of your clarification?
It had to do with the comparison of present value between the two proposals. Yes.
So you had done a present value calculus between the two proposals.
I had, whether it was in response to the question or after we received the proposals, I don't know.
Okay. And at the time, I think your clarification was that instead of the Mr. Corus offer being worth a present value of some $270,000 more, it was actually a difference of some $230,000 more. Is that what your comment was?
I think the comparison was that is if the sale proceeded, you know,
Of course.
if this money was received and I compared the present value of each of the receipts of dollars to each other.
In other words, if each was an accomplished sale, the present value of Mr. Corus' offer was worth $230,000 more, if it had been,
Approximately in my calculations, that's right.
give or take, sure. And you don't recall Mr. Corus asking for additional time to try and make his offer a firm offer?
Explain that.
Well,
The firm
I think you testified earlier they were apples and oranges because one was a cash offer and the other one was an option, right?
Correct.
And so to try and equalize those, it would be reasonable for one or the other to match the other's terms, is what I'm getting at, okay? Follow that?
Yeah, I think it'd be unfair for someone to look, you mean he could look at the offer after the sealed bids and then match it?
Well,
Is that what you're saying?
no, I'm simply asking you, did he ask for more time so that he could turn his option proposal into a firm proposal?
I don't recall, sorry.
Did you have direct communication with Mr. Corus?
I did, we had several conversations.
So, but I think you weren't the only one on behalf of the district that was handling this matter. There were others as well.
There were, but you know, what we tried to do is to make sure those conversations were held during those meetings that we had, and we did set up a sort of a group email so that if bidders had questions, then it was copied to everybody who was in the process.
And you don't recall getting any copies of that inquiries like that from Mr. Corus?
I don't recall.
But there might have been, but you just don't remember?
There might have been, and I may have been present at those meetings, I don't recall that.
You were asked about the lease extension. I think you said you reviewed the lease.
You know what, I'm not sure when it was that I took a look at the lease, and but I'm familiar with it.
Okay. Have you ever prepared an opinion for the district with regard to the as to when that lease option should be exercised?
When the Loyola option should be exercised?
Right.
You know, they extended the lease before I started working for the school district, so no.
And you're not aware if one was ever prepared, are you?
I'm not. I just recall from, again, the minutes that reflect the discussion about the, I'm not.
Well, the district's lucky to have a lawyer on staff, well, maybe. But do they use you in your capacity as an attorney?
No.
Not
I mean, I think that I may have different insight, and I suppose to a certain extent in reviewing contracts, then there may be some of that work that I do.
So,
I can.
so you don't give
That's not the
legal,
prime function of my job, by any means.
sorry, to cut you off. So you don't give legal advice then?
I try not to.
And hopefully you turn them down, or perhaps do they ever ask you for legal advice?
Well, it comes up, and what I really try and do is run it by our council if it regards an agreement. And that's really, by and large, the most often times that I'll be doing a legal task, is if I'm looking at a contract or looking at an agreement.
I noticed that, did you have other questions?
Just one quick one, Your Honor. Pat, do you recall the board approving the final buy-sell agreements?
Yes.
That's all I have.
Do you have any questions?
I just got one follow-up question. I started telling the couple others, but you said that you did a present value calculation of the Coors offer versus the foundation offer?
Yes.
Okay. And basically, that was $20,000 today and $1.7 million in approximately 5 years.
No, I think that what I looked at on the Coors offer is that it would be 1.7 million, and then I included the annual lease payments from Loyola, that, you know, because the lease would still continue through those 4 years.
Okay.
That was part of the calculation.
And then you discounted that back using some interest rate.
Percentage, right.
Okay. When you picked an interest rate to make that calculation, did you take any risk factor into consideration?
Well, no.
Of course not.
Based on your experience, would that be normal to do where they may or may not make the payment at the end of 5 years?
Well, absolutely, and the point of the present value calculation was not that this is the best offer today, because they're apples and oranges. And certainly one would have the possibility of not happening.